Oh, this can only mean one thing. It's time to start puzzling it up. Welcome back to another episode of the Poker Puzzle. My name is Flix, and today we're going to be puzzling it up with this beautiful hand, 8-6 of spades, that I played one of my recent 25 no-limit Zoom poker streams. Let's start puzzling it up, guys. All right, puzzle box, work your magic. We're looking at the beautiful 8-6 of spades in the big blind of a 25 no-limit Zoom poker game. We don't know anything about the players at the table except for one player who happens to be the under the gun open raiser. The under the gun open raiser is a solid, regular player. He's a tight, aggressive guy. We've played higher before at higher stakes, but we don't know much about his specific tendencies. All I can say at this point is that he seems to be a competent, winning player at this level. And he makes an open raise for 3 times the big blind. We see a flat call on the button from a player with a somewhat smaller stack size, which could be an indicator of a recreational player, but we don't know that for sure. We're in the big blind now. We're closing the action with 8-6 of spades, and we have 2 options here. Folding is definitely none of them. Calling in this spot is the most obvious decision because we get to close the action. We only have to put in another 50 cents into a pot of 185. So we're getting better potters than 3-1, which is a very good price, especially for a low suited one gap connector. It can hit some very nice disguised hands, and we actually try to cover the board textures that the raiser and the caller sometimes do not cover, or if they cover, then we can hit bigger or we can draw bigger, and we can hopefully win a big hand, especially given that we have what's called relative position. We're going to be in a good spot to basically check to the preflop raiser, see what he does, then get the info about what the button player does. If either of them puts in a bet, we'll see what they do first, and then we can react or act accordingly. So calling, that being said, is an option. We could also consider squeezing preflop, which means that we would re-raise to a somewhat larger size since we're out of position and we face 2 opponents. We'd probably pick at around a pot size bet to try and either force out both opponents or to isolate one of them, which favorably would be the somewhat perceived weaker player on the button. Definitely make sure that you got your frequencies of squeezing in check here and that you have a good ratio of value to bluffs, and that you also pick different sorts of hands like 8-6 suited. It does make some sense, but also make sure that you adjust it according to the general tendencies of the player population at the level that you play. At 25 no limit, I believe it is probably a little bit better to call, and that's what I did in this situation. The flop comes ace 10-4 with 3 spades, so we flop a flush. Is that for real? How do we flop flushes like that? Those team pros, they always flop flushes. They always run so good. Well, okay, so how are we going to play this? We have several options here. Of course, we could lead out and try to start building a pot, but it would look quite strong. What kind of hands would we be leading here typically? We're not really perceived to have very many bluffs if we lead. We usually lead 1 pair hands, maybe really strong hands, maybe a high spade. But usually we should start checking, and that's what I did here. So I was facing the continuation bet of the solid opponent from under the gun. And the button player makes the call. Now again, I have 2 options. I could go ahead and check raise, or I could go ahead and check call. Check calling would mean I slow play my flush and I just try to see a turn card before making another decision. I try to get more money into the pot. The pot is already building. If I check raise here, what do I look like? I look super strong in my opinion. It's kind of the same deal. I usually will have very strong hands check raising against 2 opponents in that situation, one of which is an under the gun raiser and continuation better on ace 10-4 with 3 spades. Quite a scary texture, to be honest, especially for an under the gun raiser. He can have all the ace kings and the ace queens and the high spades, of course, and I will get value from those hands, but it's only that small portion that I get value from. And it's going to be quite easy for me to play if I check raise here because I only have to make sure that I don't put too much money in if the board pairs or if another spade comes. But in general, I think I want to go with a check call way because that keeps my hand somewhat more disguised and it helps my opponent to maybe make bigger mistakes on the later streets more easily. Especially given that there's a recreational player in the pot as well on the button, I would love to keep him in the pot. If I check raise here, I believe he's usually going to be calling on the flop with a lot of weak stuff. He could be calling with a hand that has a very low spade in it. He could be calling with a 10. He could be calling with queen jack with a jack of spades, stuff like that. I basically want him to stick around in order to try and maybe even make a second best hand like 2 pair or a lower flush or even something like a straight. So I go ahead and make the call. Turn card brings the 9 of diamonds. I decide to check again. And I expect the under the gun raiser to keep firing on this turn card with basically the same range that he fires on the flop. Even though he did get 2 calls, which might be a little bit scary to him, I believe he should be betting all the same hands that he bets on the flop. Every high ace, every ace with a good kicker with a spade to it, every draw with a king of spades, stuff like that. I think he will fire again. It's very consistent with what I would expect. He bets pretty large, and that's exactly the kind of size that I expect against 2 opponents. He needs to add some fold equity to his semi-bluffs with the queen or the king of spades, say queen jack or king queen, king jack with a king of spades, hands like these. He needs to protect his hand. He will get calls from all the high spades. He will get calls from every ace, I believe. So he's right to bet quite big on this turn card. Again, he gets a call from the recreational player, and now things start to get a little bit more tricky because both of these guys' ranges all of a sudden got a lot stronger. The recreational player calling on the flop, no worries at all. He could still have a super wide range. On the turn, it's a little bit more condensed of a range that he'll continue with. But in general, I believe that one of these guys could most certainly still have strong hands like sets, 2 pair, and especially also flushes in their range. So I have to be a little bit more cautious now. I think the window for me to start check raising is very small, and I should not use it right here, because if I check raise the turn, as I just said, check raising on the flop already looks super strong on a board texture like this. If I check raise the turn now on a 9, that does literally change nothing at all. I'm basically committing myself to the hand, and it signals to my opponents an insane amount of strength. So I think my only option here is to just call again and then wait for the river action. So I make the call. The river card is the Jack of Hearts. Now with the Jack of Hearts, King Queen makes a straight. Anything else not really improved except for maybe Ace Jack that makes 2 pair. Pocket Jacks with a spade. Kind of unlikely that he would be firing a hand like that on the flop and the turn against 2 opponents as a semi-bluff, as a bluff. Kind of unlikely that the recreational player has it because he did not 3-bet pre-flop. And I mean, he could be playing Pocket Jacks low, but in general, I think the Jack only makes 2 pair get there or a straight with King Queen possible. And I check again because I believe that the Jack should be somewhat scary to my opponents. Again, if I lead out here, what do I represent? I represent pure strength against 2 opponents. There's literally not much I could be bluffing with, or I could be perceived to be bluffing with. That being said, I guess my best option here is to check again and just hope for one of my opponents to value bet or to bluff incorrectly on this river. So now the regular player goes ahead and moves all in. He's got me covered. There's a pot of $17.29 and he's putting in more than that with the recreational player still to act and myself still to act. What does that mean? Puzzle box, you gotta help me here. I mean, this looks insanely strong. I gotta be honest. Let's first of all await the action from the recreational player. Maybe that gets easier. If the recreational player now calls, I think my alarm bells have to go off. I mean, there has to be some chance of a higher flush being present. Higher flush combos, King Queen of Spades, King Jack of Spades, Queen Jack of Spades, the 9x of spade combos definitely makes sense for the caller to have. The open raiser, not so much. I think the under the gun raiser is more likely to have the Jack X, Queen X, and King X of spade combos. And that would be limited to 4 combinations: Jack 9 of spades, Queen Jack of Spades, King Jack of Spades, and King Queen of Spades. Maybe if I'm lucky, he might open the occasional 9-7 of spades, but it's kind of unlikely. I consider him to be a very reasonable regular player, so he would not be opening too wide with spade combinations from under the gun. I think I should come up with like 4 to 5 flush combinations in his range, and then we'll have maybe a lot of good hands in that recreational player's range, and that could definitely contain a lot of suited hands, like suited spade hands that we didn't even account for, because recreationals can't call hands like, you know, King 9 suited, King 5 suited, because they just want to play those hands, you know, and especially given that he has the button and he has position. So if he calls, I think I should probably strongly consider folding my flush. Now, the tough question here is puzzle box, and you got to help me on this. Are we going to hold him or are we going to fold him? Because the recreational player is getting out of the way now. I mean, I have to figure out what kind of hands could my opponent be betting for value like this with a sizing like this. Would he be picking that sizing with a hand like pocket aces, pocket tens, pocket jacks for that matter, although I don't believe he would be playing it like that. But can he be picking that sizing with a hand like king queen? What kind of bluffs could he have? He could have a king of spade type bluff, but would he really be following through on this against two opponents of which all of them have been just calling all the time? He needs to be worried that there is some sort of flush potential, like there needs to be some flush combos that are slow played by either of us too. So he needs to be worried about that too. So when he jams here, I believe he's highly polarized. I don't think he's betting aces like that. I don't think he's betting ace jack like that. I don't even think he's betting pocket tens like that, or any set two pair combination for that matter. I think he's only betting the flushes like this, and then we have to account for some hands like king queen with a king of spades that he might be betting, and he might be thinking, since he has the king of spades, it's unlikely for us to have a flush, and maybe he can put up enough pressure. Maybe he can sometimes get called by worse when he jams with the straight to be perceived as bluffing. Or what kind of hand would pick that sizing that is not a flush? That's the whole question. That is really what went back and forth in my head, and I was taking my entire time bank for this hand, for this decision, and I was close to folding it, because as I said, there's only a couple combos of flushes that beat me, that I perceive my opponent to actually be opening from under the gun position in a setting like this. And given that I also block two spades, it's kind of unlikely, but there's only 4 to 5 combos again, opposed to maybe having that odd chance that he might be overvaluing king queen, or that he actually has king queen with a king of spades, or that he's turning some sort of hand with king jack and the king of spades into a bluff. That's what I have to hope for in this situation, because as I said, I don't think he's pulling through with a set or with two pair in this situation, because he needs to be afraid somewhat that one of us has been slow playing all the way, even though the board texture didn't change much. And king queen is also a threat. He might still be up against a straight if he doesn't have a straight himself. So I kind of, went back and forth in my head, and finally I was going for the call, but I was not happy. And he typed into the chat, "You were considering a fold, weren't you?" And he showed down with the jack nine of spades. So I found this spot to be super interesting, a very, very tough spot to puzzle with, and I'm very much curious to hear what you guys think. So do let me know in the comments, how would you have played the hand? That's it for this episode of the Poker Puzzle. I'm still waiting for you guys to send me your hands. Don't forget to come to my Discord chat or post them in the comments down below. I will always take a look. If there is a tough poker puzzle to do for you guys, I will definitely pick it up. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope it gave you some valuable insight into how I approach tough spots like this, even with strong hands that I play in situations that are kind of uncommon. I would really be interested in hearing what you guys think in the comments. I really enjoy doing these episodes, so if you do like these episodes and if you want me to make more, click that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the videos, and I appreciate all the support, guys. Much love. Don't forget to check out the grindingitup.com store. We've got all the Grinding It Up gear available now. We've got the Grinding It Up hoodies, the shirts, the Doing Always Wins hoodies and shirts, and the Grinding It Up zippers. If you want to represent Grinding It Up at your local poker game, I would much appreciate it. Also, don't forget to check out all the other videos on the channel. I'll see you guys next time, and keep grinding it up.